Hey y'all! For this piece, I encourage y'all to think about layers, portals, and veils between the portrait and the viewer, and all of the different questions that can raise. How can you convey complex metaphors through the use of some layer of mediation and the image behind it? Let's get into it. I always like to start the process of a big project with some thumbnail sketches. This helps me get acquainted with the composition, see the big picture of how major proportions will relate to each other, and the size and placement of shapes of negative space. Because this is a quick one-color sketch, I can break things down to positive and negative space and start to understand the most important aspects of the composition. What will this piece look like from 30 feet away? Always work general to specific. I recommend doing thumbnail sketches of your favorite 3 photos that you've cropped down, and then choosing which one to use as reference for your project. If you'd like to expand this project in your personal art practice later on, you now have a few extra images to use for reference. Once I've selected the image I'm going to use for this piece, I'm going to tape off the edges of my paper. It's up to you what kinds of materials you use for this project, but I'm going to demonstrate using a combination of watercolor, Frisket or masking fluid, and colored pencil with a light graphite sketch beneath it all. First, I'm going to begin with a graphite sketch because it's the most erasable. As usual, I'm going to start with gesture drawing, work in big, loose shapes, and work the whole composition at once to get my overall proportions mapped out. I'm drawing very lightly with my pencil so I can erase easily and layer on top, while also covering up my sketch completely in later stages. Remember to use horizontal and vertical plumb lines to check your major angles as you go, but also as a way of creating a subtle grid. Ask yourself questions like, where is the halfway point? How do these major landmarks relate to these halfway points? Using a horizontal or vertical plumb line can help you check that certain landmarks are lining up with others the way that you see them in the photograph. Feel free to use more extensive gridding methods if it helps you. You'll notice that I moved the positioning of the hand and arm several times. It's very important that while we're still in this loose gestural sketch stage, that we're constantly evaluating our work, checking our proportions of one shape to another, and using our sighting and mapping techniques to check the angles. You can hold your pencil up to the reference image and check to see if you've translated over the correct angle. Once I've triple checked my proportions, step back from my work, and use the negative space shapes to help me look at the big picture, and feel confident in this as my underlying roadmap, I can move on to the next step. Next, I jot down the overall gesture of this netting that I'm holding in front of my face. As I'm jotting down these foregrounded shapes, I realize an issue in the figure's proportions that I hadn't noticed before. It's hardly ever too late to reevaluate your work and rework a section, especially when you're working in pencil. Because I'll be doing my layer in watercolor next, but I want to be able to paint the portrait separately from drawing in the foregrounded netting, I will use masking fluid to draw my netting in and create a resist from the watercolor. This way the netting will stay white while I paint the figure with fluid continuous marks. This masking fluid is a latex-based material, so I'd avoid it if you have a latex allergy, and it can be easily rubbed away later on after my drawing is dry. Don't use a paintbrush to apply, as it will totally destroy your brushes. I'm using a white pencil that I sharpened. This way any marks that it accidentally makes will be white. You can also use the back of a paintbrush, a toothpick, or any other creative solution you come up with. You can also use an old paintbrush that you're okay with sacrificing. I'm thinking about applying my masking fluid drawing with a sense of gestural, confident line work. I'm less worried about perfection as I am capturing the fluid movement of this netting. I learned that using alternating C shapes that go in opposite directions for each section of each strand was a great pattern of mark making to follow. Figuring out your own method of achieving a complex texture can make it move faster, and you might discover your own personal method you can use in the future. Let your masking fluid dry completely before moving on to watercolor. When working with watercolor, I always like to start by diluting my color quite a bit and working very light at first, while I sort out the most general, biggest shapes, and then I can get more specific as I layer it. I always recommend adding some color to your background early on, so you can sort out the values in the portrait without that pesky white page skewing all of your relative value. As I begin laying in value in the portrait, I'm going to leave my highlight areas white for now. Preserving the white of the page can give your watercolor painting a sense of freshness, giving it an overall appearance of glowing from within. This allows all of our transparent layers to create a subtle gradient towards the light or the white of the page. For my skin tone, I'm using complementary colors to neutralize one another, to create a very specific set of brownish tones that relate to my specific skin tone. Instead of using just straight up brown and diluting it into different values, I recommend mixing your own neutral brown tones that match the very specific temperatures that you see in your skin, and building slowly from light to dark to build volume, light, and shadow. I'm using a combination of this light lime green and my two red tones. One is a yellow leaning red, more of like an orangey red, and one is more of a purple leaning magenta. The light green works well to neutralize the red. I sometimes use more of a green leaning mixture for some of the darker shadow areas. In the deepest shadows, I add a bit more blue to my mixture. After I have all of my shadow masses blocked out in big light shapes of washes, I let this layer dry and begin to build up a second layer. In addition to the neutral brown tones that I built up before, I find that bringing in some light oranges into my palette helps me create some moments of heat where the light is hitting, such as the lit up areas on the fingertips and some of the moments on the face. I found that putting this bright orange right between the highlights and shadow masses helps to build a more rounded out gradient of light, while also giving a more saturated emphasis on these moments. Using tiny round brushes or the crisp edge of a small flat brush can help in getting some of those important hard edges that define the shadows within the nostril, the edge where the lips meet one another, and the shapes of shadow that I see in the eyes. It's important to really have a very delicate hand when you're jotting in these hard edges on the face. And remember that not every bit of every feature is going to have a hard edge. After these layers dry, I add some colored pencil on top. Thinking about the directionality of my marks can help me describe certain planes. I used my colored pencil playfully to give each gradient of light more vibrance. I really love this neon orange Prismacolor pencil. Sometimes I use my colored pencil in small circular motions to create a more soft atmospheric section of color rather than defined lines or hatching. Once I feel good about the amount of volume I've created in the portrait, I felt like it was time for me to remove my masking fluid. I felt like the background and middle ground are nice and resolved, and I'm ready to move on to that foregrounded layer of really rendering that netting. To remove your masking fluid, make sure you have clean hands and your paper is totally dry, and gently rub the masking fluid away. It will be dried latex that's stuck on your paper. I move my hand in circular motions and check my hands frequently to make sure pigment hasn't gotten onto my fingers, which could dirty up the white masked areas. With my masking fluid removed, it looks pretty interesting and exciting with white lines of netting, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's in front of the figure, but rather moving through it. So next I'm going to add some light, shadow, and color to the netting itself. And I think that this will help make the figure-ground relationship of the netting to the portrait to what's behind her a little bit more clear. This should help push that netting right up into the foreground. So next I add some color and shadow to this netting, continuing to evaluate the relationships between the netting and the figure. I can use my colored pencil to create sharp, crisp moments of high contrast that allows the netting to feel even closer to the viewer. I could work on this piece for eternity, but it's always important to know when to stop. I think I've captured the energy of my overall concept, and I appreciate the combination of dense layering of color and space with the light and airy qualities of light. I don't want to overwork it, so I'm going to call it complete. Thank you so much for watching, and happy art making. Can't wait to see what y'all make. Bye!